Hey, beer appreciators, Swaddy Krab. Welcome to Beer Time Story, the platform where beer and brewing knowledge is shared. For today's session, we will have some good burps about yeast essential nutrition. They are what they eat topic. Well, it is undeniable that yeast is the hardest worker of all in the beer brewing process. The saying that brewer makes wort, yeast makes beer is an inevitable truth. When we talk about fermentation, it is normally being simplified, or you usually hear people say that yeast eats sugar and give away alcohol and CO2, which is true to some extent. Yet, in the brewing process, brewers often add the so-called, yeast nutrients to the wort. So now let's think about this for a moment. Let me pull this photo up first. Okay, so the first one is if yeast eats sugar and they can do that job very well, why bother adding the nutrients, right? And the second one is like, what do those black box yeast nutrients actually consist of? You may want to think about it. And the third one is, does yeast actually need those nutrients? Or the better way to put it or to think about it is, what do they really like to eat or need to eat? And what do they use the thing that they eat for? The last thing that I would add up is that what could possibly happen if they don't get what they need? This set of questions is the guideline for today's session. Well, and we will try to uncover it with the help of our guest speaker, who I share about 1/10 of the passion he has for yeast. Let me introduce him to all of us. With a biochemistry and microbiology background from University of Guelph in Canada, in 2010, he entered the brewing industry and began absorbing beer and brewing experiences. His role was mainly focused on microbiology QA/QC aspects. Not long after that, in parallel with his time working in the brewery, he also started teaching the brewing program at Niagara College, which lasts until the present day. But that is not it. After about 4 years in the industry, together with his two friends, they found that there are opportunities, or there was a void for liquid yeast offerings in Canada. So in 2014, they opened the very first brewing yeast lab in the country under the name Escarpment Labs, with the aim of producing high-quality cultures that consumers can trust. So please welcome our guest speaker, Nate Ferguson.
Hey, everyone. Nice to be here.
Hey, Nate. Welcome to the platform, man.
Nice to be here.
Cool. So what's happening? You've been busy doing teaching and all things at the lab, or yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things we have currently going on right now for Escarpment is actually our 10-year anniversary. It's
cool.
hard to believe, but we just turned 10 years old as a business. We are now, it's been exciting. We're now trying to summarize everything we've been going through and trying to provide to our clients for the last decade, and that has been a little overwhelming to say the least. But it's exciting. We're here trying to make everyone's life better on fermentation, trying to improve everyone's knowledge so they can make better decisions for themselves inside the brewery.
That's cool, man. That's cool. And just curious here, are there any interesting studies or research that you are currently working on or involved in?
We have a few that we can currently kind of publish, so that we can try to keep some of those things out before we start coming in. We try to keep this as close to the chest before we publish them. But we are working on some new educational content right now. One of the things I've been working a lot on is actually a yeast repitching manual or guide, some sort of, and you can find a few of these we have on our website already. We have a biotransformation guide, a yeast nutrition guide, which I'll probably be referring to today. Working on one or two other ones on the side of this, but the yeast repitching one is going to be the next one that comes out. So expect to see some new educational content from us on that topic.
Yeah, man. I'll look forward for what are we going to put out. It's very helpful so far. Those materials.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Glad to hear. That's what we're here for.
Cool, man. It's funny to think that during a lot of things happened during the period that we call COVID. People may have already forgotten, right? But that's the first time that I catch up with you guys in YouTube.
Yeah, and that's something that we've ever since we started, and coming from kind of the teaching college background that I have, which I kind of stumbled into. That's a whole other conversation for today. But we always wanted to make sure we could we were able to increase the knowledge of the people of our clientele. We wanted people who, even if they're not buying from us, we wanted you to have access to the resources that we have internally, so that you can make better decisions inside of your own facility. That's been one of the core things that we as a business have wanted to do since day one. So COVID, it was, everything changed, everything shook. Everyone's reality pivoted pretty hard, and
Absolutely.
we realized this is actually an opportunity for us to help. So, people are going to be stuck at home. What are they going to do? They're probably going to be scared or miserable at home. Why don't we do something that can make their lives better, or at least give them something interesting to go through? And that's what we really tried to focus on. We did a handful of webinars, a bunch of different types of webinars for it.
Right.
We did Escarpment Con, which is a 2-day yeast conference that came together in a week, which was that one.
That's wild, man. Yeah.
It was a crazy thing. Like, everyone was home, so we were able to pull together a lot of very, things that would be almost impossible to do now. We were able to pull on these different people to bring in. And one of the big things that we've also always tried to do is we don't want to be. You see this, really see this in beer, but you absolutely see it in other industries where your competition is your enemy, or the person who took the sale is this terrible individual. It's like, no, we want to have the best people in network. We want to make sure that if we know someone who can answer the question better for us, or can give us the resource, we want to have access to them, so that our clients, so that everyone does better. So we were able to pull on people from like Leuven in Belgium. We were able to pull out different university professors. We were able to pull up different suppliers even, and to provide good content for people. This is, we don't want to be this. We want to be the area where anyone can come and learn yeast information that's accessible. That's the other part. You go to certain. If you start, even if you go through like ChatGPT now and things like that, some of the content you get is they're speaking sciencese or different language. It's not useful. One of my goals has always been to make things approachable. It kind of stems from I think I don't know how ubiquitous worldwide, but there's a Carl Sagan quote, the guy who ran Cosmos and things like that, where you need to make things as simple as they can be to communicate, but no simpler. Like, people want to know those kind of basic fundamental truths about how something works, and if you can communicate that to people in the simplest terms, everyone's appreciative.
Right. Totally agree. Yeah, and the reason that I bring that up was because that like when I stumble upon the content that you guys produce, the concept that I kind of catch is like, I mean, I've never thought about it before, but you guys think of yeast, like why they do what they do, like what's the principle or what's the reason behind it. And when you put yourself in that aspect, it's kind of open up another, perception of how you view this, love the yeast, and that's very helpful,
Absolutely. Like this, I remember I was working at a brewery here. I won't say which one, because they've changed their ways. They're much better now. They're still around. They've been around for a long time. But I was working with the head brewer when I was working there, and like we're making an IPA. It was new hops and things like this, and like he's explaining all the hop profile to him. He's explaining like why he's putting hops in different part of the process. He's explaining even like some mineral adjustments. This is like 2008, 2009. Like this is like way before like adding minerals and salts for NEPAs and things. That was a thing. He's going through all of this stuff. And I'm like, what about yeast? I will just throw it out and hope it works. I'm like, no. No.
Jesus, right. Yeah.
It's like you're spending all this time pouring over all the other ingredients, but you treat yeast as kind of like this black box of like, I don't know how it works. So hopefully hopefully it's happy.
Yeah.
So trying to fix that, or trying to make it easier for people to understand has been one of our goals.
Excellent, man. Yeah, cool. And I think we've warmed up, our conversation a bit here. So it's time to hit the main road about the topic here. Nate, I think sometimes I just can't help myself thinking about, the behavior of yeast in comparison with us, human, like perhaps maybe because, we kind of share similar cell structures and metabolisms and all those sort of things. And, if we think about us, like what we eat, we all know that, all those essential nutritional requirement, which is like carb, proteins, fat, mineral, vitamins, right? I believe that this concept can also apply to the yeast as well. So
Absolutely.
let's first talk about what they like to eat first, and then we can dissect down each element of it. Okay.
Okay, so let's do it.
Okay.
So yeah, yeast cells do, as you said, they need carbohydrates, they need nitrogen, they need oxygen, they need minerals, they need vitamins. Arguably, they don't need oxygen. That's a separate. They really enjoy it. They really like it, but it's not necessarily absolutely required. We'll just kind of go for the simplest way forward. We're kind of start with carbohydrates, and then I think we'll kind of work our way around this. So yeast cells in general will consume the simplest thing they possibly can. First, they typically will focus on glucose, then fructose, then sucrose, then maltose, and maltotriose inside of beers. So they go with the monosaccharides being glucose and fructose, and then go to disaccharides being sucrose and maltose, and then trisaccharides being maltotriose. Now there are some edge cases here. There are certain yeast strains that are what we call fructophilic, where they consume fructose before glucose. There are some yeast strains, especially the beer 1 strains, that really don't like sucrose. There's some weird metabolism. We don't understand what exactly happens with that yet, but we know it has some odd interactions. We see decreased viabilities when they consume sucrose. We're not sure why, at least in our experience with it. Many labs use sucrose as a feedstock for growing yeast cells. It works great. There's just some things you have to tweak with it, usually break it down beforehand. And yeah, then there's maltose. Once all the glucose and fructose is consumed, which is the most readily available, then you go to maltose. And this is where I like to kind of break this down a little bit. Sure. I like to think of it like an energy transaction or a financial transaction. So maltose is made up of 2 molecules of glucose to glucose. Okay, and there's a bond between the two that attaches them. So in order for yeast cells to consume the maltose, they can't just eat maltose. They have to first cut it and then consume. So if we're looking at this as an efficiency standpoint, let's say they get 100 units of energy for consuming glucose.
Right.
If glucose is around, they just get 100 units of energy. Great. If they have maltose, they have to spend 20 units of energy to break it down, and then they get 100. So they're having to spend 10 per unit, 20 between the two, 10 per unit of glucose. So they're actually is less efficient from an energy consumption standpoint, energy production standpoint, sorry. And that's one of the main things that governs how yeast cells consume everything. If you kind of think of it yourself, if you have something that's already pre-cut up for you, it's a lot easier to eat than if you have to take the chicken off the bone and things like that, or you have to peel potatoes, whatever it is you're trying to eat. The more work you have to do before you get the available food, the less likely you are to consume it first. Same thing for yeast. They're not different. They're not strange. That's just how they work. Same thing goes for maltotriose. Maltotriose is glucose, glucose, glucose. So they have to spend 20 or 40 to break down the thing into maltose, and then another 20 to break it down into glucose. So the more complicated the sugar gets, the bigger the sugar gets, the more likely it is to be consumed later in fermentation. That's generally how it goes. That's for Saccharomyces. If we start looking at other organisms with Brettanomyces, which we're going to have a hard wall on that one. We're not going to go into that topic today.
Right. She's crazy.
Yeah. We see fermentation inhibition with glucose. We're not getting into that step. Yeah, the larger the saccharide is, the later in fermentation is going to go. This also means that the more if we have a stuck fermentation or we have any sort of sluggish fermentations, anything like that, the sugar we're more likely to see left over is going to be a more complex sugar. Like whenever we see under attenuation, it typically is, we don't see glucose and fructose left over. It's always trisaccharides. It's more complex, larger chain sugars that are left over.
Right. Understood. And just so yeast consume those kind of simple sugars to uptake the energy to function their life, right? That's the simple purpose of. Okay, so same thing as
just like how we eat.
Yeah,
exactly the same reason why we eat.
Right, and I think there is one phenomena. I'm not sure about the terms, but when it's like a glucose repression, right? When you have like a high amount of glucose, yeast will stop eating maltose. That's some sort of thing.
Yeah. So, and this is strain to a certain degree, strain dependent. Like you'll see certain strains, not so much beer yeast, but you see other yeasts where if there's if glucose is around, they won't consume the larger molecules. Saccharomyces cerevisiae, so like you used to use it in fermentation, but arguable, I haven't seen the study just comparing the two, but just anecdotally,
right.
Beer yeast will consume multiple sugars at one time. Like they'll consume glucose, fructose, and sucrose all at the same time. And then they'll consume maltose and glucose at the same time. And then maltose and maltotriose at the same time. Other organisms will consume all the glucose, stop. All the fructose, stop. All the maltose, stop. Like, excuse me, it's very singular sugar focused. Where
specific,
yeast cells just tend to consume as a wave. Multiple carbohydrate sources at the same time.
Interesting.
I believe that I believe that mainly has to do with the enzymes associated with how they bring things in across the membranes.
Right.
So yeast cells use hexose transporter proteins to bring sugars from one side of the membrane to the other, and depending on the structure and how they're focused and other enzymes around them for degradation, that can change how they're able to consume different sugars.
Gotcha.
That's how the scope of today. I think that we're getting in the weeds on that.
That's all right. So those fermentable sugars, we all know, like hopefully we all know that it mainly come from the malted grain or those cereal grains, but they're so available in hops too, right? In slightly small quantities.
A small amount, yeah. So the bulk of the fermentables comes from malt, assuming we're not doing the corn or rice or adjunct beers, or things, in which case it's coming from whatever that is. The main enzymes inside of wort that break down, or inside of malt that break the sugars down, are alpha amylase and beta amylase. Alpha amylase is a random cutter. It just kind of randomly cuts stuff apart to give us more reducing ends, which is important because the beta amylase can only act on those reducing ends. And beta amylase is the more unique one, where it just kind of goes around and so we have a long carbohydrate, like 40 long units or so. It will come along and break it down into two. It just cuts two carbohydrates. Exactly, generating lots and lots and lots of maltose. So whether or not we are using corn, or we're using rice, or we're using barley, or we're using like unmalted wheat or oats for making New England IPAs, we're always going to have maltose be the dominant sugar, regardless of source of carbohydrate. Now, the other part for this, the dry hop portion, is hops will contain a little bit of typically glucose, fructose, maybe sucrose. I mean, monosaccharides. Typically, monosaccharides is my understanding. I'm not a hop guy. I think I have that right.
Yeah.
The internet will tell me if I don't. The more interesting thing is that a lot of hops have a high concentration of an enzyme called glucoamylase, and this is what causes what we call hop creep, where the glucoamylase is kind of like the alpha and beta amylase before, but instead of breaking things down into maltose or maltotriose, 3 sugars, it mainly produces glucose. So the sugars associated with hops primarily aren't found in the hop. They're found as a byproduct of the enzyme found in the hops.
Gotcha.
And the source of this enzyme is widely contested. I've seen some papers suggesting that the enzyme content is actually due to molds and funguses that are on the hops during growing. I've heard, I actually haven't heard this one in a while, so this might be disproven at this point. But some people suggest that it's naturally produced within the hop as a natural byproduct, and that modern kilning technology with lower temperatures and more controlled environments, nitrogen purges, things like that, are maintaining these enzymes that previously were purged and broken down during the kilning process, and now they're stable. As we get more flavor profile. Yeah, as we get more essential oils retained within our hops, we also get more enzyme content reserved, which makes sense. Retained within our hops, just an unintended consequence. So how much sugar hops add is odd. But we've had a few clients where, they're seeing. Do you guys use Play-Doh or SG mainly? Is it
SG?
SG. Okay. Like they'll see 10 to 12 point decrease in gravity just due to dry hops. Like and especially making like double dry hop IPAs or things like that. There's some breweries we've seen go from like 1028, 1030 down to 1010 with dry hop grade. Like 28 points can be like and sometimes they actually take advantage of it, where if they were to mash their beers normally and
dry
not
out
really high they dry out too much to the point where it becomes borderline astringent. It's like it's the dry hop creep can be a really serious problem because the yeast cells are just, if you give the yeast cell glucose or a monosaccharide or disaccharide, it's going to consume it. You need to be able to control what's available to them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also some brewers who have done things where they'll do a mild hot steep of their hops prior to dry hopping. Not common, but I know there's one brewery near us that does this, where they'll essentially pasteurize their hops to kill off the enzymes in a pressurized environment so that the essential oils don't flash off, but that also means they don't get hop creep.
That's new to me.
There's different techniques and ways you can kind of use to balance these things. And I'm not saying that's an easy to execute method, but it's shown to be effective for him. So it is an option.
That's right. Cool. Dry hopping, hop creep is another whole world, of the
that's a whole
discussion.
That's a whole other discussion.
All right. Let's move to the next nutrition, the protein, the nitrogen.
Absolutely. So this is one of these topics that I find people don't understand well, and for good reason. It is a bit more confusing. It is a bit more complicated. So let's relate everything to humans before we do anything for yeast cells. So not all protein for humans has the same usefulness. The based on the composition, amino acid profile of the food you're eating, will change things. So proteins, just to go back to the top level and work our way down. Proteins are long chains of things that we call amino acids. Now, for humans, we have about 20 essential amino acids that we need. So there's 20 amino acids. Some of them are essential, mean we can't produce them ourselves. A lot of them we can, but there are a few that we require to get from our diet. Same thing goes for yeast cells. Yeast cells can produce most of the amino acids themselves. It changes. There's a few oddities for a handful of the strains as to which ones can produce others. And like sake yeast can produce functionally all the amino acids. I think there are like one or two it can't. It's different. There's different reasons for this. Not all amino acids are the same usefulness. They're not all the same, energy value or just value in general. Some of them are going to be more intense and more required. Some people might have an amino acid deficiency, like a B12. We'll get to vitamins in a bit. They might have a vitamin deficiency or things like that. So you can actually have an amino acid deficiency if you are, as a human, if you are really, if you have a very restrictive diet or you're missing certain portions, if you're certain people who are vegan have had certain amino acids that are missing based on what sources of protein they're going for. It's an important thing.
Right.
Same thing goes for yeast. Yeast cells need all these different amino acids in order for them to produce the proteins. Now, the proteins that yeast cells make are numerous. There are thousands. We are mainly proteins. Proteins allow us to move our fingers, to move around, for our brain to function. Proteins do everything that we need to do. So if we don't provide enough of them, then the yeast cell won't function. And it's not just enough of them total; it's the right types of them. So you'll have an issue with yeast cells where they might be missing like aspartate or glutamine or a certain amino acid, not all amino acids, just certain ones. So the main way in which most yeast cells get their nitrogen is through the wort. So malt extract is a wonderful source, typically, for amino acids. Now, depending on how you've handled your wort or how you manufacture your wort, that wort will have more or less available FAN or free amino nitrogen, available for the yeast cell to consume. So there's a thing that is and there's different ways to square this. The English brewers, like English maltsters, they'll when they're making their malt, they will malt it in the malt house for a longer, or steep in the malt house for a much longer period of time. It's what we call over modification or kind of over germination. And then what this does, it will produce more free available nitrogen for the yeast cells inside of the wort. Now, the opposite of this is the Germans. The Germans will under modify their malts. Their malt stays in the malt house much shorter periods of time. To account for this, they would do things like a protein rest or a peptidase rest, or a protease rest, like around 45, 55 degrees Celsius, so a mash rest. And that'll be how they're able to get, add more FAN or add more available protein to the yeast cells. Where we see people have a lot of problems with this, a lot of problems, is that they'll use German style malts with a single infusion mash like you would for the English, thinking the yeast cell will have excess nutrients available to them, and it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And that's when we start seeing a lot of fermentation problems, sluggish, odd growth patterns, fusel alcohols, acetaldehyde, things like that.
Right.
Also different problems associated with it.
Got you. And can you just break down a little bit here, like when we call FAN, free amino nitrogen, like how free is it? Like maybe confuse people a bit.
Yeah, it's sorry.
All right.
It's not in jail. It's not bound.
It's not tied to something, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a nitrogen group or an NH3 group that you see on the outside of the molecule, which again, this further makes things a bit more complicated. We're not talking about like urea or ammonia. We're talking about the ability for the yeast cell to scavenge. This is actually a good thing to get into. We're talking about the ability of the yeast cell to pull nitrogen off a molecule. So this is going to take us a little bit into fusel alcohol production, off-flavor production. This is the top. This is what I wanted to hit on today.
All right.
So if the yeast cells are growing, let's say they need, doesn't matter the amino acid, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They just need nitrogen. Okay. If they need to make a certain amino acid, they have two options. They can either rip it from their environment, or they can synthesize it from scratch.
Right.
They can build up. It's like if they have Lego bricks, they can take the Lego bricks and make the amino acid, and then they can use that to build the protein they need. That's one of the ways they can do it. Or ideally, it's just in the environment. They just pull it out. The pulling it out from the environment is the ideal. That is absolutely ideal. If you just provide it to them and say, "Here is your amino acids you require," that's easy. Like the yeast cell doesn't have to do as much energy, doesn't have to release as much energy. I'm oversimplifying this, by the way, but it's easier to communicate the point.
Right.
If I just give them, here are your amino acids, it's much easier. Let's go back to that synthesis one, because this is where we see people get into problems. So, is Lego a thing in Thailand, by the way? I assumed it was.
The what?
Was the toy Lego, like building bricks?
Oh, yeah, sure, yes.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. Like, I've never been there. I don't know. Not a question I asked you before.
It's all right.
So let's say if you're building Lego and you're building this amino acid Lego piece, and you're missing a certain piece. That could be our fan. Okay. Now, in order to get that piece, I might have to break something else that I previously made, or if that's in my environment. Like, I got a bunch of these other things that are floating around. I can grab a piece of fan from that, stick it on. Excellent. I've made my amino acid. But what's left over are two things. One thing that's left over is I now have the garbage that's left over from the fan I took that's floating around. And that can be a source of fusel alcohols. Those hot, kind of burning alcohols we associate with poor fermentation. That is actually one of the sources of these kind of leftover stripped elements from the environment. That is one of the sources of fusel alcohols, is just leftover amino acid remnants. The other thing is that, whenever you're building anything, we have a few YouTube shorts coming out about this soon. I'm looking forward to this a lot, actually. You may not build it right. You might screw something up. Like the piece might go in the wrong place, or something might snap or break or misalign, whatever it may be. And now we're left with this deformed thing. We tried to make an amino acid, but now I have an error. I have an offcut. If you're trying to build something, I have the dirt, the waste in the environment. I have the messy countertop for making bread. Like it's the secondary things. I was trying to make bread, and now I have a messy kitchen and bread. Kind of idea. Right. So you have to now deal with that messy kitchen, or whatever the issue is. That is also a source of off flavors.
All right.
That is also a source of off flavors. So the easiest thing, if we're trying to make the beer as clean, as neutral, or as controlled flavor profile as possible, is just go, here is your amino acid.
Here you go.
Very simple. There's no creation pathway. There's no destruction pathway. It's just, here's your thing. And the yeast cell's super happy. If we don't do that, it has to go through and all of these efforts and also use a ton of energy, which is it would rather use to do something else, in order to just be healthy.
Right,
So
right.
when we start looking at why fan is really important, if we don't provide the yeast cell enough fan, we are going to create a ton of mess, create a lot of waste, and stress the yeast cell out because it doesn't want to be making all these amino acids. It'd rather be doing something more useful for you.
That sounds really, really bad.
Yeah, it's not great, and this is why like one of the first things excuse me, one of the things we look at when people start having fermentation problems or they're troubleshooting is, okay, what's your amino acid profile? What's your fan content? How much nitrogen is actually available to your yeast cells? This is also why when we start looking at flavor profile creation or troubleshooting for these things, it's like, okay, are you adding yeast nutrient? Because yeast nutrient has tons of fan in it. It has a lot of, not just lots of, but high quality fan.
Fan, yeah.
So the yeast cell can easily consume all these different things. It doesn't have to go through all of this. It doesn't have to make all of this mess. It can just consume and move on.
Because the thing, I think one of the good point here is people often think about, okay, wort has sugar, that's the main source of energy, but somehow, like what we mentioned before, we eat protein to build muscle and all the functions, all the organs. Right? I think the same thing happened with the yeast, right? Especially they are budding, right? They have to share the organ. If they don't have enough building blocks for those things,
they can't do it.
Yeah,
they just can't do it.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And it's, everyone likes to think, yeast equals sugar plus yeast equals CO2 and alcohol, but there's a lot of other things that go on. That's like saying human plus food equals CO2 and excrement. It's not. We're more than that. So are they.
We're more than that. So are they, of course. And I think it's a very important point. That you provide enough fan or free accessible nitrogen terms that yeast can have. Okay. All right.
One thing one thing to finish on this part before, I think, because this is a good segue for the next part.
Sure.
Everything in excess is bad. Everything in excess is bad. So if we start looking at things like American-style barley wines, Russian imperial stouts, imperial IPAs, anything that's, say, north of 8% or so, and mainly like 100% barley or like 90% barley, all malt, that can push us on the opposite extreme, where there could be too much fan. And that can also cause off flavors. Like there's a bit of a Goldilocks thing here. Like, anything in extreme is bad.
It's bad. We just keep that in mind.
And different yeast cells will require different amounts of fan, just like how different humans will require different levels of proteins or nutrients in their diet. There are certain yeast strains like Cali, American Lager, Mexican Lager, like they don't require as much. They're simpler. Like they're I don't want to say they're more resilient. They don't need to consume as much.
They are lean.
That might be a way to look at it. Yeah. Other strains require much more. And that's not a bad thing. There's almost like it's a correlation, not causation. So keep that in mind.
Right.
But in general, the more expressive the yeast strain, the more flavorful the yeast strain is, the more fan it requires. That breaks down to a few exceptions. Everything has exceptions. But generally, the more flavorful a strain is, the reason it's flavorful is because it has to consume more protein. It's one of the reasons.
They need those building blocks. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. The next thing is oxygen, but they don't use it for breathing.
They do use it for breathing. So I like to start this. I always like to talk about oxygen or wort aeration. In kind of thinking about humans, like our bodies do go through anaerobic respiration. Our muscles have the ability to not use oxygen. This is what happens when you're lifting or you're moving your muscles. Like we breathe in air, our air goes into our lungs, which then goes into our bloodstream, which then moves all around our body through our circulatory system. And that's how all of the different portions, our brain, our muscles, our legs, whatever it is, gets oxygen to do the things that humans do. That's how we're designed. Our muscles, if they say the circulating oxygen, we're really pushing something like like you're in the gym, you're doing a bench press, a deadlift, something like that. Yeah, exactly. Like you're really pressing. If you can't get enough oxygen to your bloodstream, your muscles still need to go. Your muscles still need to function. So what they'll do is they will use anaerobic respiration. They will go, they'll produce energy far less efficiently And this is one of the things that produces lactic acid in your muscles, or what causes DOMS or muscle soreness the next day. Yeah, exactly. Like this is what causes that. But our bodies have the ability to do this. Now we don't like it. We don't like it, but our bodies do have the ability to do it. This is just like how yeast cells function. Yeast cells have the ability to go through anaerobic respiration. They have the ability to do fermentation. They don't like it. We like it.
Yeah.
Brewers like it. They don't. It's not their preferred. To quote my son, he's 7. It's not his favorite. It's not great. Like they can tolerate it, but they would absolutely prefer to have access to oxygen. Now, if we just do a little quick timeline on this, if you look at how brewers have handled their fermentations for the last, as long as we've called them brewers, until very recently, it was not stainless steel fermenters that are closed, like that didn't exist. It wasn't an option. It was open vessels, wooden casks, open top, open fermentation, constant access to oxygen. We've changed that for very good reason, from a sanitation, from a specific standpoint, from a shipping distribution, like very good reasons. We don't do that anymore. But it does change the environment for the yeast cells. What we're asking yeast cells to do is to now take a huge breath and then be okay holding their breath throughout the rest of fermentation. Where before they were used to being able to kind of come up for air throughout the ferment because it was open. They get little hits of air throughout their entire time.
At the surface, yeah.
Exactly. So this is the reason I bring all this up is that this is why a lot of people struggle with wort aeration. It's because it is a relatively new thing. The yeast strains struggle with wort aeration. Excuse me. Because it's not how they're used to operating. This is not how they're used to functioning.
Survive.
This is a weird environment for everyone. kind of think of it that way.
That's true.
So with that, let's dig into it a little bit. A lot of people aerate their wort poorly, and they're not aware of this. Like they'll have we've seen clients where they're operating like a 4,000 liter, like a 35 barrel system, 40 hack, and their aeration stuff is this tiny little thing. like it's just not going to do much. It's just not like you need. We have a whole YouTube video series lecture on this on wort aeration, and I really want to update it because I have some better images and figures in there. I'm trying to get these things. We mentioned to the top that we did a lot of online stuff during COVID. We're trying to bring this stuff back. We're kind of now on the outside of those things shaking up a little bit. We're in Canada, so the US is a weird thing right now, but we were trying to make education kind of a serious portion of what we do, like a bigger thing what we do again, because we have new things and more things to say. But making sure you have your wort aeration system scaled properly is really, really important. It's incredibly important because yeast cells need it to produce fatty acids. They need to produce ester profiles, which we could talk about a bit for esters. They need it for all sorts of different things to make their cells happy and healthy.
Right.
They need it. Now the question, again, I was at a conference about a week ago and they asked about this, like, can you over oxygenate your wort? I have some issues with the premise of the questions, and I want to kind of I like taking this apart a little bit.
Right.
If you were to go look at a textbook, it's behind me somewhere.
I mean, if you want to grab something like.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
Like if you look at Kunz, you look at the yeast in the brewery, you look at like any of these kind of classic beer brewing textbooks. They'll tell you ppms of O2 ranges as to what you need. Now, to break down what they're trying to do or what that ppm range means, I think is important. So if you're a macro brewery, you're making, for us, Coors Light, Molson Canadian, Budweiser, Bud Light, things like that. If you're making a big beer like that and you over aerate, you give too much oxygen, the beer will become more estery. It'll be more expressive. So if you're making North American style light lager, you want it neutral. That's a problem. And on top of this, you're going to see more biomass and less alcohol.
You get
less more of those carbohydrates. Too, right? You get less beer. All of these things for the macro brewer are terrible. This is decreasing and hurting yield. That's not great. That's really not good. So they're looking at how much oxygen do I need to add in order for the yeast cells to be healthy, but not sacrifice volume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the thing they're working at. So too much means decreased efficiency, not poor quality.
Mm-hmm.
For the craft brewer, this is a different scenario. So for the craft brewer, it's how much do I need minimum to get my yeast cells to be happy? And the next one is how much do I need to add in order for them to be expressive?
Mm-hmm.
And generally, the more oxygen we add, the more expressive the yeast strain becomes.
All
Now,
right, the
a
more
craft
crazy they
brewer
are.
might, yeah, the
Sorry,
craft
yeah.
the craft brewer might lose 0.1% ABV,
Mm-hmm.
which for the macro brewer is unacceptable. That's too much. But for the craft brewer, the beer tastes better and it's 0.1% ABV less. Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like that's fine. That's
Why not?
absolutely fine. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, that might be better. Um, I I can't think of a situation where over aeration is a problem,
Mm-hmm.
except one, which we're going to talk about. Like as long as whenever the yeast cells have access to more oxygen, they're going to be happier, healthier, and more expressive. Just like how you, as a human, uh,
Could we breathe in?
yeah, yeah, we like having more oxygen for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. Just like
Mm-hmm.
yeast cells, they tolerate anaerobic, they tolerate not having oxygen, but they
Mm-hmm.
prefer to have it. Now,
Right.
the only one exception as to this, as to when you can over aerate, at least in my experience, is when the yeast cells aren't exactly ready to consume oxygen. So if our
Mm.
yeast cells are dormant, they're stored, we've had them in a yeast brink, or they haven't been fermenting for a week or two, something like that.
Right. Right. Right.
If we expose them to oxygen, it's like someone's like if you're asleep and someone's trying to get you to eat something. Don't That's a weird image. Let's not do that one.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
If,
But
if,
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're not yeah, we're on with it. If you're asleep and someone's giving you food and they're saying like, "Why aren't you eating?"
Mm-hmm.
It's because I'm asleep.
Yeah. Just give me
I
time,
made you
right?
dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me some
Yeah.
time to wake up and realize my environment,
Mm-hmm.
and then once I know where I am, then I'll eat. Same thing
Mm-hmm.
happens with these cells, where
Right.
if they're asleep, if they're dormant, they're not able to respond to their environment, and then you throw a bunch of oxygen at them, they can't do anything with it. They're
Mm-hmm.
asleep.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They need to be a little conscious. They need to be aware of their surroundings. They need to be able to actually
Mm-hmm.
consume at that point. And what ends up happening is just much like when you bite the skin off an apple or you peel an apple and it starts going brown and discolored, or
Mm-hmm.
if you have unsealed cast iron, it starts to rust and oxidize.
Rest.
The same thing happens
Oxidized.
to
Yeah.
the outside of the same thing happens to the outside of the yeast cell. Oxygen is incredibly reactive.
Mm-hmm.
So if the yeast cell is not able to breathe it in and consume it, it just gets damaged.
Oh, okay.
That oxygen hits the outside of the cell. It also hits malt compounds. It also hits hop compounds. It oxidizes, it stales the flavors from the
Everything. Yeah.
wort.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Oxygen's incredibly reactive. So if the yeast cells aren't there to consume it, they're not able to breathe that thing in when you provide it. You're going to have problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like that
Mm-hmm.
oxygen is not going to be able to consume. It's like, yeah, you added. It's I can't think of a good analogy for it, but if they're not able to use it, it's useless. It's
Right. Right.
absolutely useless.
Got you. And can you just emphasize on the role of oxygen for yeast a bit here? Like, what do they need it for during the
Oh,
fermentations?
absolutely. Yeah. So um, yeast cells use oxygen for a lot of different a lot of different elements. I have a little video on this as well. I think it's not the same aeration lecture that we have,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
I'll list a few because there's just
Yeah,
lots.
just to the yeah, just the main
But
one.
the
Yeah.
first ones is sterile synthesis. That's one of the classic
Mm-hmm.
ones. At least you should look at like classic textbooks. Sterols are required for things that we call membrane fluidity. So it's
Mm-hmm.
you have a little picture in the bottom left of your diagram on the right.
Right.
Those sterols allow the membrane to move
Move
around
around.
for proteins and enzymes to go through. If the yeast cell is floating around and a C2 bubble comes up from behind it, it allows it
Uh-huh.
to cushion the impact and not just rupture and shatter. Sterols
Right.
are very
Right.
important for the ability for the yeast cell membrane to adapt and flow and move things
Mm-hmm.
around. If they don't
Right.
have them, they become rigid and harder for things to move around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one of the most
Gotcha.
important things for sterols. Sterols are also oxygen is also very important for certain fatty acids. Other fatty acids are associated
Mm-hmm.
with just general health.
Mm-hmm.
Also, certain coenzymes and things that they're very important for synthesis.
Right.
I would argue the most important thing, though, oxygen is needed for is the production of what you can just call energy. You could say ATP, which is
ATP.
adenosine triphosphate,
Yeah.
but it's to be a bit more accurate. There's a molecule called NADH, nicotinamide. I don't recall the exact full name for it,
It's the electron carrying things, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the electron transport chain in order to generate ATP, but it's used a lot just in its core form. So one of the main things you'll see it used for is actually the what's it called? The enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase converting acetaldehyde into ethanol.
Okay.
So when we start looking at off-flavor production, production, or why certain off-flavor persist. If the yeast strain does not have enough NADH, which is the direct result of having access to oxygen, direct result. If we don't have oxygen, we don't have excess NADH. We have arguably just the bare minimum, if that.
All right.
And if we don't have NADH, acetaldehyde does not convert into ethanol. So we then have acetaldehyde or other aldehyde problems. Diacetyl as well, to offer that buttery kind of characteristic that we see in beers. In order to break that down, the yeast strain has to spend 2 molecules in ADH.
Yeah. So that's very important.
Very important for a lot of fusel alcohol degradation. They were for fusel alcohols converting to esters that requires indirectly NADH. A lot of these different things that we see inside of the cell, in order for the cell to be healthy, in order for the cell to do things that we want them to do, they require NADH. And in order to get NADH, we have to supply oxygen. So without oxygen, all these other kind of downstream processes don't happen. Now you can produce this is what dry yeast does. Full disclosure, we partner with Lallemand for anything that are best manufactured dry yeast. Period. That's
Pomona, right? The new strain.
Yeah. Exactly. Pomona is. I'm very happy. Pomona is an excellent. That's a good product. I'm very happy that came that way. Cool. We also use Kaisail. We do work with them, quite frequently. When they're producing their yeast strains, they do certain things to enhance the base level of NADH inside the cells. So like when you're using certain dry yeast, when you're using them, they can kind of have like an NADH battery.
Right. Cool. Cool.
It's not one of these things. It's not one of these things where if you don't provide oxygen, none of these things happen. It's like no. They have like an NADH battery that they can kind of use. But once that battery's gone, it's gone.
Right.
You're out. You don't have the ability to. Excuse me. It's also why you'll see some people when they use dry yeast. The first gen for the dry yeast will taste great. If they're not, and if they don't aerate, if they don't aerate, the second gen or third gen doesn't taste great because they may have that battery. The first gen when it was dry might have had a full charge. Second generation might have had like a half to a third of a charge, but the third one it's out. And if you're not aerating to keep that thing charged,
I'm not going to work for you, man. Like this kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I can't do the thing. It's like why aren't you breaking down acetaldehyde into ethanol? I don't have the energy to do it.
Yeah.
Like yeast strains are never trying to make you happy or sad or mad.
Right.
They're just doing things for their own self-interest because they don't know you exist.
Like they just want to live their life, right?
Yeah, they're just doing their thing. So if they don't do something, that's strictly because they don't have the ability to do it. And I guess the other thing to mention on this is that aldehydes and diacetyl are toxic to yeast cells, or mildly toxic to yeast cells. They don't like them. They want them gone too.
Same thing as alcohol and CO2, right? They don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and you could argue that alcohol for them is just the least toxic substance they can produce in their environment.
They can tolerate.
That's it.
Yeah.
So oxygen is really important because it helps drive all of these different processes, all these different protocols into the yeast cell. Now, the question that you get as do I use compressed air? Do I use pure oxygen? Like, what are the options for this? I'll say for escarpment, we use compressed air. We're aerating consistently for hours and hours and hours. So if we were using oxygen, it'd be financially not feasible.
True.
But it really depends on kind of your total setup. Unfortunately, at least here in Canada, North America, and larger, there aren't any people who kind of specialize in wort aeration equipment. It's kind of driving me nuts. There's a few companies in Germany that do this quite well. But in the beer or food space, there aren't a lot of people who do it. There's some experts in like wastewater treatment facilities, desalinate, like things like that are very good at wort aeration, but there isn't a food centric one. Because in general, just adding more is the ideal. If you're a small brewery, like you're making 1,000 liters or so or less, I'd probably lean towards oxygen, pure oxygen. When we start, if you have larger fermenters, say 40 to 80 hec, especially if you have very tall tanks, pure oxygen compressed air becomes much more of a viable option. I can say for the big macro guys here, they all use compressed air, but they're also properly engineered.
Okay. Yeah. Like the dial in for this, for the
dial it
for the cellar. Yeah.
Exactly. If you're looking to increase your wort aeration, the first thing this will sound silly, the first thing I would make sure you do is make sure that your yeast cells are happy and healthy first, and active before you start looking at wort aeration. Because we've had clients do this where, they will double or triple their wort aeration and they get worse results. It's like, well, what's happening then? You're probably, as I've talked before with those yeast cells, they're not able to
uptake,
be in their environment to uptake. So they're just getting damaged. So the first thing you need to make sure is that are your yeast cells actually able to consume the oxygen you're providing? And then once you confirm that, then start looking at oxygen, air, volumes, amounts, things
numbers.
Like that. Exactly.
Gotcha. So 3 nutrition so far. We got carbohydrate, carbs, protein, and then oxygen. The next one is minerals.
Yeah, let's do it.
Little tiny stuff.
Yeah. So these are something that is poorly understood. And I don't just mean by we understand it a lot more than we did, say, a few years ago. The need for minerals, especially when it comes to zinc, magnesium, things like that. So we'll just kind of run them through. So out of all the nutrients that we have here, I would argue that zinc and calcium are probably the most important too. We'll focus on zinc first. So zinc is probably the hardest mineral for the brewer to ensure is maintained in their wort. So about, depending on how you look at, 70 to 80%, I think I have those numbers right. It might be 80 to 90, but we have that in a blog post somewhere. Of the zinc will precipitate out during boiling. Most of the zinc that we add that's present in your grains, in your lauter tons, things like that, it all falls in a suspension in the grain process.
It's gone.
And this is it's gone. It's gone. And to layer on top of this, zinc concentrations in the soil, which is where the plants get the zinc to begin with, globally is going down. It's due to agricultural practices and things like that. There's certain places in the world where the average person, if you were eating just domestic food, would need to radically supplement with zinc in order to be healthy, because the soil just doesn't have enough of it. It's just
so
your farming or
decrease too, right? I mean,
exactly. So if the barley we're working with has half the zinc to begin with, and we're losing 80% of it, we now have half as much.
We have nothing.
We have nothing. It's not good. It's very not good. So that's and the main reason you need zinc is in order for a lot of these things, what are called metalloproteins to function. So metalloproteins are the most iconic one that you can probably think of for a human is heme. Heme is the inside of your red blood cell. It's the thing that actually allows your red blood cell to bind to oxygen and then move it all throughout your body. That heme has an iron core, which makes it a metalloenzyme. Iron-based enzyme, metalloenzyme. That's what it is.
Right.
A lot of proteins inside a yeast cell are the same thing. So a lot of flocculation proteins are calcium-based metalloproteins. For zinc, one of the most iconic ones, not the only, one of the most iconic ones, is alcohol dehydrogenase, the enzyme I just mentioned previously that converts acetaldehyde into ethanol and is fueled by NADH.
Yeah,
you can almost think of zinc as the spark plug for the enzyme to a certain degree. Yeah. So this is where when we taste beers that have off flavors, knowing this, we can kind of run through. If the beer has aldehyde flavors, it's one of two causes. It's either you don't have enough NADH or you're missing zinc.
All right. Okay.
And we can kind of break this thing and walk our way through. To dive a little bit on that, if NADH issues also have other problems. Like we'll see that if NADH is indeed the missing ingredient, we'll also see, esters be low, diacetyl be higher, fusels be higher, and aldehydes increase. So we have these kind of secondary characteristics of the whole thing. So if I see all of those, I'm like, okay, it's probably a wort aeration issue or a fan issue. Like it's that. If I just have aldehydes,
only aldehyde,
it's probably zinc.
Zinc. Yeah, just only two things. The what you mentioned.
Yeah. We also see zinc associated with flocculation issues. It's really required for just general health. Now, the best way to we'll talk about all of them and then kind of talk about how we can add more to them.
Yeah, sure.
At the end. So going to calcium. Calcium is mainly associated with flocculation. It's also associated with kind of just the inorganic reaction. No, it's an organic reaction. From Maillards, the kind of browning and caramelization reactions we see happen, especially in direct fire kettles. Not so much with steam kettles because the temperature of the liquid isn't high enough, but with direct fire kettles, you get that dancing where calcium can really cause an increase in browning if we see too much of it inside a solution with higher temps. Magnesium is why, in my opinion, very overlooked as an essential brewing ion. Magnesium, we have seen in ourselves internally and in our clients, we've seen magnesium be very, very important for lager yeast flocculation. We don't know why, but lager yeast seem to be they seem to require it for flocculation. Like we've had some people where they're making lagers, they're using lager yeast, but their yeast strain is very powdery and they're trying to handle and harvest it.
Powdery, yeah.
Ensuring adding magnesium chloride or magnesium sulfate is a consistent way to help drop the yeast cells out more efficiently. Okay. And we don't understand why. We don't understand, why is it binding to the flocculation proteins in that such a way, but we've seen that.
What you observe. Yeah.
The last two are a bit odd here. So you have here. So manganese. Manganese is important as a very, very small trace amount, but it has been shown to have actually some negative impacts for New England IPAs when it comes to staling
oxidation.
Oxidation. Yeah. So manganese is known to induce, or is it doesn't with free radicals. I can't recall exactly the mechanism behind it, but it's been shown to cause more rapid discoloration and precipitation of the haze out of beers. It's either flaked oats or flaked wheat that is known to have more manganese. I'm outside of my element on this one for just
right, but either of them. I mean,
it's needed in trace amounts, but the wort's going to have more than enough. And copper is a weird one. So copper in high concentrations, you can get copper poisoning, just like you can get arsenic poisoning or whatever other iron poisoning, whatever it may be. Yeah. But copper the yeast cells do need in very, very small amounts. Very small amounts. Now the issue with copper, or not the issue, this has to do with new builds, like new facility builds. So there's an iconic story. It's out there. You can find it in the Master Brewers Association, so I have no problem saying this. I want to say it was Golden, Colorado. I think it was Coors. They built this brand spanking new state-of-the-art facility. Everything stainless, which is the important part. We're talking the water lines were stainless. Everything was stainless. Not a single piece of copper anywhere. They're using, the highest quality rice or corn or whatever it was, and so the lower mineral content to begin with, raw inputs. Right. And the water profile had no copper as a baseline from the ground. So they actually had problems with copper, not having enough copper inside of their brewery, inside of their water profile. And what ended up happening was, the first batch would ferment okay, and the second batch would only ferment like halfway, and the third batch would hardly start fermenting. Not having enough copper has been shown to be a problem. So for them, just aside, the way they fix this is they now have a copper rod that they stick in the middle of the wort stream on the outfeed before the heat exchanger, and it picks up the trace amount of copper it needs and it's done. It was a very easy solution for them, but it literally shut the entire facility. Apparently, this is before my time. It apparently shut the entire facility down.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And just because of the copper, not having copper, no one thought about it because why would you think about it? Because copper is used for water pipes, but they didn't use it. Yeah. So when it comes to getting all these minerals in it, the wort provides a lot. The water profile generally provides a lot. Out of all these minerals, the one that's the hardest to get in there is absolutely zinc. Absolutely zinc. And the way in which you see some people add this is a problem. That's why I want to spend a little time on it. So I mentioned before that a large over 70-80% of the zinc that we add falls out. It's not just zinc; other magnesium, calcium will also fall out, but zinc is the worst when it comes to precipitation. It's also the most limiting in regards to availability. So you can do things like add zinc sulfate heptahydrate. You can buy it online. You can buy it at different places and add it to your beer. But if you make sure you add it on the cold side. Chill your wort out first, and then add your zinc solution. That'll be far more effective for the yeast cells to be able to consume it. And you want to add it, cast your wort out, add it right as you're adding your yeast cells, and do it right at the very beginning. We did a little bit of work on this, but it's very hard to overexpose your yeast cells to zinc. But don't push it. Like don't add too much.
Push it.
An easier way for this is to not add an ionic form of zinc, which is zinc sulfate heptahydrate. It's not organically bound to anything. It's inorganic. A better way to do this is adding things like I mentioned. We work with Lalamin, so they'll push one of their products. It's Cervomyces. Cervomyces is grown in excess concentrations of zinc. So those yeast cells that you add have really, really high concentrations of zinc inside of them. Really high concentrations. So when we add this to our kettle, because they're organically bound, because they have carbon associated with them, they don't fall out of solution in the whirlpool or as we boil. They survive. We don't lose. They survive. The zinc is still bioavailable for the yeast cells after. One of the products that we sell, which is our core yeast nutrient, we call Yeast Lightning. This is also one of the foundations that we built this thing on. We make sure that the yeast extract that's in there is grown with really high concentrations of zinc. Just so that you don't have to worry about this, because when we started really digging into this a couple of years ago, we realized oh wow, everyone is zinc deficient except for the few people who were using different nutrients for it or were doing it right. Like most people were zinc deficient, and as soon as we added that to our yeast lightning mix, it's been for a lot of people it's been night and day. It's really very very important. The other ones you're probably going to find just naturally, but zinc is the hard one.
Cool, because I, like in the past couple of years, I've been keep hearing more people dialing, the use of zinc, the way they're going to use it, the amount, the quantity, and I think it's kind of better because they feed their yeast better, so they're going to have better fermentation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and like we've even seen people. How to put this? So we were talking before about dry hop creep and the impact that. Okay, back up a little bit. So if we add our dry hops to a beer, that secondary degradation of carbohydrates into simple sugars
happens.
It happens. Period. It happens. You have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Now, the issue here can be, say we've added our hops, it's all good, but the beer hasn't gone down in gravity, and you're thinking this is great, it's fine, not a problem. The sugars are still there. The sugars have been produced.
Yeah.
The yeast is still there. But what's happened is that the yeast has decided not to consume the sugars because they're dormant. They're sleeping. They're resting. They're looking at the sugar being like, hey, there's a high alcohol environment. There's no oxygen. There's no fan. I'm tired. I'm not doing that yet. So as the yeast cells sit around for a little while, they might, their internal carbohydrate reserves, their fat, so to speak, starts decreasing. They're like, hey, that food looks really good right now. I'm going to start consuming. And then you may have a situation where 4 or 5 days later, or worst case, you've packaged the beer, it's canned, you didn't filter or pasteurize it. And this, you talked before about brewery setup. This isn't really a thing this is like being the large size breweries. But worst case scenario is that the yeast cells start to re-ferment in the can on the store shelf.
That's the worst case.
That is the worst case. So anecdotally, this is a podcast, and I think a paper that was published by Sierra Nevada Brewing about 2 or 3 years ago. I want to say it was Sierra Nevada. I don't know if they actually published the literature, but I know they talked about it a handful of times. Where they saw that when they started adding more zinc into their fermentations, that time required for the secondary re-fermentation due to dry hop creep started shrinking drastically. Drastic. It's going like sometimes a day or so into hours. So that
okay.
ability for the yeast cells to kick back into fermentation does seem to be associated with zinc. We don't understand the mechanism, but it does seem to be,
It's very important for them too. Yeah.
Very important there for re-fermentation to occur in an expeditious way.
All right. And the last one on the dish is the vitamins. Vitamins.
Yes. All right. So vitamins are, take your vitamins.
Yeah. Okay.
It's needed. They're important. Now, much like everybody said so far today, vitamins are going to be found in our wort. They're going to be found in all sorts of different things, all the different things we add to it. Now, just like humans, different people are maybe deficient in certain vitamins. Certain yeast strains may require additional sources of some of these vitamins. Certain yeast strains may not be able to produce some of these vitamins. This is the other reason why we look at yeast extracts and kind of how when we started looking at formulating our yeast products like Yeast Lightning, that became a really important thing. I just want to take a quick moment to just kind of talk about that. That product was originally designed as an internal solution for us. Yeah, so as we're growing our yeast cells, we would notice like, hey, why did this batch not grow to as high a density or not perform as well? It's like, okay, well, we're the manufacturer. We dig into these things, and we had to figure out why is it? Oh, it's missing inositol, or it's missing pantanoic acid. I can never say it right. Pantothenic acid. B5. It's missing riboflavin. We started realizing, like this is.
So you break them down, which are missing, right?
Exactly. And if you go to our nutrition guide, you can see in there we have a whole portion. If you go to our website and go to nutrition guide, it's all there. You can see that certain strains need more of these different vitamins and nutrients than other ones. It's just how they function. Just like how certain people can't synthesize their own B12, or they can't synthesize enough B12. Same exact idea. So all of these B vitamins, which is why they're called, so let me back this up a little bit. There are vitamins that are important that are not B vitamins.
Right.
There are also B vitamins that are there are also compounds that are functionally B vitamins but aren't called B vitamins. The term B vitamin is a very
vague.
I feel like it needs an update.
Yeah.
It needs an update. But all B vitamins are associated with whether it be a human or a yeast cell taking that glucose beforehand and turning it into energy. So there are tons of steps between glucose to energy. And those, just like we talked about alcohol dehydrogenase catalyzing the reaction between acetaldehyde and ethanol, every single one of those steps is catalyzed by an enzyme. And some of those enzymes are stabilized by these B vitamins, or they are these B vitamins. The B vitamins allow all these steps required from sugar to energy to go smoothly. So if we're missing one, that can be the choke point. That can be, hey, why are you really tired? I'm missing B12. Okay, well, that's why. Because your enzymes can't produce the proper amount of energy because you're missing that cofactor.
Right.
Like this, it's the same idea. So when it comes to proper amounts for this, there's a few. We talked briefly earlier about under versus over modification. Just like how we see when we see over modification of malt, and we see more FAN become available, we also see more B vitamins and anhydrous become available. Minimal research on that, but in general, that's what's believed is as we modify the grain more of these vitamins become accessible. Under modified grains, unmalted grains typically have less of these things. There's no clean answer on this topic, unfortunately, other than you need them and the yeast cells need them. Now, the other, I guess, the last things I'd say for it though is that having, unlike fans, where if we have excess amounts of B vitamins, and that can become a problem when we start seeing barley wines, which is very fusely hot alcohol type situation. You don't really see it with excess B vitamins.
Okay, they're cool.
Right. Yeah, it's not the amount that you're adding from yeast extract is not going to be toxic. It's not going to be massively negative. It's going to be minimal impact, if anything. Minimal impact. If you're having odd, like one of the classic issues is with a lack of these things is that the yeast cells are sluggish. We start seeing kind of similar to under aeration characteristics, or we see long lag times. Like these are all things that suggest like, okay, it's kind of like humans. It's not just one thing. You're probably missing zinc. You're probably missing a B vitamin. You might need more fan.
Right.
When we look at our nutrient profiles, it's like, okay, let's add all of these because that way we know all our bases are covered. Like that's how we conceptualize it. Like add them all. So no matter which one it is, it's fine.
Make sure she has it all. I mean, like, yeah.
Exactly. And none of these are situations where if we add too much, we're going to have a problem. So if it were, that'd be different. And you have to dial certain things in and kind of feather them in and make sure it's that's not more of a Goldilocks thing. But for B vitamins, we don't really see that. They're very important. If you're using English style malts or kind of like what I usually call North American style malts, kind of like your standard modifications, I mean, like from raw or gangrene, from raw or something like that. That's probably a good level. But if you're using filter malts, this can be a problem. You can be missing some.
So it seems like malt is the whole source of all this nutrients if you use them.
Well. Absolutely. So just to take a quick pause on this, or just kind of dive on this. So from our standpoint, from a yeast manufacturer standpoint, it's a bit different from what a brewer needs. Where you will see 1,000 liters or 10 hex of beer results and produce maybe maximum 40 trillion cells. I may see 120 to 200 trillion cells. Depends on the strain. But I'm pushing that. So as the malts, as the
yeast
as the supplier, as the producer, propagator, I'm going to see any sort of issues in the malt before you do. And there have been years or lots where it's like, wow, that's a bad batch of malt. We have seen it and we've had to adapt to it. And that's where I talk about our yeast lightning. That's where it came from. It's like, in a single calendar year, we might have 5 or 6 different lots of malt, and 1 or 2 of those lots of malt might have really low fan, might have be lacking inositol or riboflavin, or it might be lacking something. And so when we were looking at yeast lightning, we generated this as like our catch-all. How much of this do we have to? We add a much higher concentration than what we recommend for brewers. But we look at it and like, what do we have to add in order to make all of our yeast cells happy and no one to be lacking any micronutrient?
Right. That's fair enough.
Yeah, malt, because malt, as you said, like it is the core for all of these things. And people don't take into account the fact that it changes, it moves, it's an organic product. Not organic as in like it's a natural product. We can't. It's not a chemical.
Variations, year-to-year crops and all that terroir thing.
Exactly. Right. There are good and bad years for malt.
Yeah. So we have to adapt. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, up to this point, I think, we know like what nutrition requirement that yeast need. And I think one thing that you already emphasized is that it's kind of the term that too much of anything can kill you. So just have to know the amount of it, to serve it right.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about one thing here is that, so let's say we talk about nutrients, what to eat, and now to think of they are what they eat, right? You've already touched at some point about, the off flavor and all sort of stuff, the acetaldehyde, the diacetyl. So let's just zoom in here a little bit and just talk about, what could possibly happen if, yeast is living, the poor nutritional environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do like a worst case scenario. Let's say we're talking about a North American style light lager fermentation.
All right.
So if we have a lack of zinc, we'll just kind of I'll hit different portions through. If we have a lack of zinc, we're going to have an increase in acetaldehyde inside of our environment because the enzyme that breaks it down won't function. So the beer is going to be the beer is going to have an increased level of an off flavor being acetaldehyde, like green apple tone. If we don't aerate our wort properly, we're not going to have the energy. The yeast cell won't have the energy to break down acetaldehyde or diacetyl or fusel alcohols into their associated compounds, being alcohol, ethanol for aldehydes. For diacetyl, that just goes to 2,3-butadiol, which is functionally odorless and tasteless. And for fusel alcohols, they won't be converted into esters. We didn't really talk much about that, but that's one of the main things that drives the esterification of fusel alcohols is oxygen. Without oxygen, that portion doesn't happen. On top of this, for sulfur that you have here, the main enemy of sulfur is oxygen. So when we add oxygen to the wort, it binds the sulfur compounds, functionally neutralizing them. So just off the get-go for that, without oxygen and zinc, you're going to have a lot of problems. If we don't have enough fan, we were going to cause the yeast cells to produce more of the amino acids they require, which is going to cause more offcuts, it's going to make more mess. And that mess is going to be in the form of things like diacetyl fusel alcohols. Diacetyl and fusel alcohols. Fusel alcohols are produced as the nitrogen is taken from the fan in the environment, stripped off and made to the new amino acid, and from errors in the amino acid production sequence. So again, this could be fine. This can be absolutely fine. If we don't have enough fan, kind of pause for a quick moment. These variables are not. It's kind of a balancing act. Like you can use another lever to offset a problem you're having over here. It's kind of a nutrient balance game.
Right.
So if I don't have enough fan, I'm going to have more fusel alcohols. Okay. But if I add excess amounts of oxygen, those fusel alcohols will turn into esters, which is fine. So like you can almost account for less fan by having more oxygen. Like we can make up for one diminished portion by accelerating something else.
That's really
this is where we start
cool concept. Yeah.
Like this is almost like a resource management balancing act we can do with a lot of these different compounds. Like if I have acetaldehyde and diacetyl problems, I can start adding excess oxygen, or I can add more zinc and more fan. Diacetyl, I didn't mention it. Diacetyl is produced as in the absence of fan, mainly amino acid valine. The yeast cell produces diacetyl when it's trying to produce valine, and it messes up. That's the easiest way to describe how we produce diacetyl. So if I wanted to have less diacetyl, I could just give the yeast cells valine.
Valine, here you go.
I don't want diacetyl. Here's your valine. Just take it. Take it.
Yeah.
Or I can do that by either adding more yeast nutrient, giving them more fan, or I can accelerate the cleanup of diacetyl by giving them more oxygen.
Right. Make it healthier.
So exactly. So there's always this balance now. How do I reduce its production and how do I maximize its reuptake or degradation? When we're looking to control certain flavor profiles.
That's cool.
So if I think it is. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
When we look at, say, poor yeast viabilities, I like to use. Do you know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is? I don't know.
I do.
Okay. I don't
Terminator.
know.
Yeah.
Terminator. Yeah. So I like to use him as an example for viability because I think it misses a really important portion. So Arnold Schwarzenegger was Mr. Universe. He was like this massive bodybuilder. You see him on yeah, exactly. He then became the Terminator, a very, alive. That's the important part. Alive, viable. He then became Governor, where he became the governor of California. Older, still alive, not Mr. Universe.
Yeah, different guy.
Not Mr. Universe. Different guy. Now he's like 76 years old, has had heart surgery, can't lift heavy, still cycles everywhere, but he's still alive. He's not Mr. Universe. He's even less than Mr. Universe. So this is an example of a human being viable, alive the entire time, but his vitality or vigor has decreased. This is normal for humans. It's normal for yeast cells.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I need Arnold Schwarzenegger to do something for me, like I say, I need him to lift a bag of gravel. Okay. Mr. Universe, that's easy.
Yeah.
Terminator, that's easy.
One finger.
Yeah, exactly. Like one of his tricep muscles. Like it's fine.
Done.
If you ask the governor to do it, he can do it. He might hurt a little bit the next day, and now it might kill him.
Yeah. One of the ways.
So when we start looking at viability, there's also this nested topic that I think is very, very important about vitality. So this is why when we start seeing people will look at cell cultures and say like if your culture is below 75% viability, don't use it. I'm currently writing a whole portion on this. I'm on the third rewrite, and it's been honestly a little overwhelming trying to get all this stuff together because it's a lot.
I can feel you. No, yeah.
Yeah, the reason that we don't want people to use cultures below like 70-75% viability is because as the viability starts going down, the vitality goes down even further.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like if I have a culture where 30% of the population is dead,
right? So
no one is healthy. No one's healthy. If I have a culture where 15% of the population is dead, yeah, mm-hmm. you're gonna have healthy people. You're gonna have enough healthy individuals to kind of get everything done.
To work for you, yeah.
Exactly. So when we start looking at yeast stress and fermentation viabilities, it becomes important. Now, I don't know what it's like there, but for here, most people don't have a microscope. So when we ask them, have you checked the viability? They're like, what's a viability? Or like, yeah, they don't have the ability to test it. So this is where doing like sensory tests, like, does I've done this with people, but it works very well. If you taste the yeast, like actually get the culture and taste it. If it tastes meaty or almost like beef broth, those are bad signs. Or if it tastes spicy, not bitter's fine. Bitter is fine, but spicy, like
spicy,
like allspice or
allspice. Okay.
Yeah. Like phenolic would be there. Not heat, not like hot pepper spicy, but like cinnamon, nutmeg, like that.
Okay.
Kind of closer to that. Not quite those exactly, but
that kind of
phenolic might be a way to look at it. Yeah. That is a sign that your culture's dying. That is a sign that your culture is stressed out. So like you can use these, characteristics of the culture itself, just with your palate, to tell you whether or not your yeast cell is super happy and healthy. Also, the best thing you can do is if the previous fermentation tastes great and it finished 2 or 3 days ago, like those cells in there are still going to be rocking. They're still going to be super healthy. Now, if you don't feed them for a week and a half, they're going to be dying because they're starved. So you don't have to use viability always. You kind of use these, what state of the cells in.
Yeah.
Exactly. These kind of other tells that we can tell if really is the thing doing what it's supposed to do. Like the microscope didn't become really commercially available for even educational entities until the late 70s. Like this is a relatively modern thing. People have been repitching yeast for literally thousands of years. Like this, you can do this without a microscope.
True.
To get back to the other things we have over here. So like stuck fermentations. Stuck fermentations usually are a lack of some sort of micronutrient, or a severe underpitch of yeast cells. That can be a cause where we have underattenuation. That assumes normal gravity worts. If we're working with like an 8-9% wort, it's completely separate, completely different. Like we're in a different ball game. Yeah, or not hitting SG. That can be a zinc issue. That can be just a micronutrient issue. It can be in odd cases a lack of wort aeration. We've seen that where the wort, the 40-hectare brew house and the stone's this big. Like that could be the case for it.
Yeah.
Or there's usually secondary things for it, especially for under attenuation and higher FGs. Let's say you cast your wort out, you aerated, but you didn't see fermentation really start for 24 hours or 36 hours. That's a sign that your yeast cells weren't awake enough to actually consume the oxygen, so you damaged them before fermentation began.
Okay.
So your yeast cells were starting, behind the starting line to begin on that one. They've run 2 marathons, not one.
Yeah, you have to drag them back to the game. You have to feed them better.
Exactly. So that's on you if you're as the brewer. And off flavors are we talked about it a little bit, but it's all it's all just trying to be good, be nice to the yeast. So give them the food they need. They are what they eat.
True. They eat.
Yeah, like if they need oxygen, just like how you need oxygen, they need proteins, just like how you need proteins. Don't give them food while they're asleep. They won't eat it.
True.
As long as you treat them well, they're going to do things you want for them. The one part on here that's to add though is it's like what we get to ask this question, and it's hard for us to answer without sounding somewhat self-serving. It's like, when should I get new yeast? When should I reorder yeast?
Okay.
When in a perfect world, every single batch.
That's good.
I'm a yeast supplier.
Right.
There is no clean answer on this. You'll see some people say who have the ability to do viability tests. When your yeast cultures start getting around 80%, put the new order in for it to make sure by the time it gets lower, you're okay. When you start seeing fermentation timelines increase, like say the beer normally took 4 days to ferment or 5 days to ferment, this last time it took 7 or 6. That might be a case like, okay, maybe it's time for me to get a new culture in. There is no one case fits all for this.
Yeah, there's no.
Just with that fermentation time on it. Like it changes based on the facility. It's like we have a few clients where they're large operations and they are efficient operations where if the fermentation takes 24 more hours, that means they're producing far less beer because that tank is not emptied. Like they're canceling someone's shift because that guy was supposed to come in and brew wort into that fermenter, but now there's still the previous beer in the fermenter. Like the packaging line is now messed up because everything is that we're waiting on this tank to finish fermenting.
Right.
If your situation like that, making sure you have more quality steps associated with manufacturing, making sure your wort aeration's on point, your fan concentrations are on point, you're doing yeast cell viabilities like that becomes really important because the control you need for your operation is very fine. If you're a small little operation where you're like, do I brew on Tuesday or Thursday this week? I don't know. And the beer takes an extra 24 hours.
It's okay.
It's not a pain point for you.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. And that's okay. So like when you're looking at when do you know is when to ask for help? When do you know when something's wrong? When do you know to get new product in? There is no one size fits all answer on this. It's going to be dependent on what your company, what your operation, what your business needs. There is no one quick clean answer.
Got you. And and I think one point that probably the last one that I want to stress here, and you've already touched about it before, but briefly here, is that not all yeast require the same nutrition profile.
No.
Right. And it's like people, we different sex, age, and different metabolism rate require different thing. So just can you please touch about it? Just for the last one here about the.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of simply put, different yeast strains require different things. That's the easiest way to put it. As a generality, again, there's always exceptions to this. Don't take any of this as gospel. The cleaner a yeast strain is, the less fan, the less oxygen, the less of all these things it needs. Needs is the important part there. If we provide excess, they're happy.
Right.
If we provide excess oxygen, they're great. We provide a little bit of excess fan, they're doing okay. They're doing great. We give them extra B vitamins. Excellent. Where we start getting into problems, we don't provide enough. So like you'll have this issue with New England IPA yeasts, a lot of NEPA yeasts, where they would typically require more. And if we don't give them more, they start getting aldehyde issues. We start getting rotting or overripe fruit issues. That's also a zinc correlation thing with them. Typically require a bit more of that. Right. If you look at certain lager yeast, they require crazy high amounts of wort aeration just because they produce a lot of sulfur and they need that to balance out. We can also give them more other things to balance that whole equation out for them. I think you had a chart here we published in our nutrition guide that actually has the fan consumptions. Yes, right there on the bottom. Yeah. You look at things like this. This is how much fans consume. With some of the Belgian strains, they consume tons, and those are very expressive yeast strains.
Right.
Very expressive yeast strains.
Exotic ones.
If you look at the bottom, yes, you look at the bottom of there, the ones that require the least: Mexican lager, Isar, Czech, a lot of the lager yeasts. Like they don't require as much, and they're more neutral in flavor profile. Again, this correlation doesn't prove causation, but different yeast strains will require the minimum requirement for different strains is different. Right. But it's an odd scenario, it's an edge case where providing a little bit more doesn't cause a negative flavor profile.
Doesn't hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. So when like conceptually, when I'm looking at whether it comes to making a recipe, helping a brewer, anything like that, my first goal, this is just how I approach things. Right. One of my principles for crafting beer or helping people is the first goal is to make the thing taste not bad.
Okay. Fair enough.
And just to break down, it's really hard to sell a beer that doesn't taste good. It's really hard to.
Yeah.
Like no one likes a beer that doesn't taste good. And sometimes you see breweries where like they have to make rent. So they have to find a way to sell that beer, and that hurts their reputation, it hurts their brand, it's not good. The first goal is to remove any off flavors. That's the first one. So like if and I'll just, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes you have to have a hard conversation. Someone be like, hey, I know you're worried about increasing the body of your beer. You should be more worried about the few alcohol flavors in your beer.
Right.
And these other
you
negatives.
solve that one first. Yeah.
Yes, let's solve that first, and then move on to the next one.
Body. Yeah.
And then we can dial in the body of your product. But like, let's make the beer not taste bad first. And in general, adding more fan won't make the beer taste better. Taste worse. In most cases, it'll make the beer taste a little bit better, especially if you're lucky.
Okay. That's cool.
I conceptually have this idea. I need to. I was talking about. I cut it from this yeast repitching guide because I've realized it's an excess topic, but now it's going to be a blog post of this kind of axis. From a clientele standpoint, there's two ways something can be memorable. The product can be memorable. It can either be really, really good where it's memorable, or it can be so bad that it's memorable. And you don't want to be the so bad that it's memorable.
Yeah, you want to go there. You don't want to go there.
You don't want to go there. Exactly. That's a reputation killer.
Right.
It's depending on the situation, though. The beer can be not great, and that's okay.
Yeah, it can be okay. I mean, like, yeah.
It can be okay. Like most macro lager is okay. It's not memorable. It's not memorably bad. It's not memorably good. You then have where most craft breweries want to be. At minimum, is they want to be good and ideally memorable for how good they are.
Right.
But not if the beer is good but not memorable, it's also it's tolerable. So I kind of look at this like a speedometer, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a circle where it's like, you want. I will try to figure out when I taste a beer, where on this circle is it? Is it memorable because it's bad? Is it not memorable and bad? Is it not memorable but good, or is it memorable because it's really good? And the goal is always to move yourself around the circle. You want to go around because you want to push your way through. If you will find yourself in the memorably bad, your next goal is the next quadrant.
Move it up.
Move it up.
One quadrant.
Exactly. And then once you get there, reassess, move on. And then that way you can kind of like you can be a bit more pragmatic. Because it hasn't happened in a while, but this is years ago. We've done a lot of work with the breweries that really set the game here, I'd say. But you'd have some beers and it's like, wow, or people come to us like, I don't know where to start with their beer. Especially as someone new that would come in there, like, I don't know where to begin. I'm like, okay, let's
slow down and
let's move ourselves around. I'm hoping to have something. That one's a little of a dicey, not dicey, but I got to make sure I got the wording on it correct. Simply because I don't want to tell people that beer is terrible.
Yeah, that's a really hard thing to say. I mean, to be honest, especially like
exactly.
Yeah.
So just trying to find a way to properly strike that tone is the hard part there.
Yeah, and to have a proper yeast nutrition is one of the key things to encounter.
Exactly, that's one of the first. Yeah, this was the first things that helps you kind of start going around. It's like if your yeast nutrition is garbage, you're gonna have lots of problems. You're gonna have off flavors. You're gonna have beers that aren't finishing fermentation. You're gonna have lots of different problems.
Things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and if they're having, this is one of the places that we as a business come in. If you're having these problems, we can help. Like we can help you figure out what's the missing link. We can give you recommendations. If we're always here to chat with anyone, regardless where they are in the world. Our knowledge base we have on our YouTube content's all free. It's online. You can go there. You can find more information. If you're having like acetaldehyde problems, we have a whole blog post on just acetaldehyde, so you can understand how it works and how to get rid of it. If you have, we do the same thing for fusels or diacetyl, ester, fan consumption, how to like mashing profile. Like, we try to have a resource there for anyone to improve the quality of their beer.
Cool. I mean, man, we've come a long way, from those simple set of questions. Yeah. What I like to eat and, they are what they eat, at the end. And with your help, we finally reached the destination, and I hope that our listener can distill a lot of valuable information, that are given from your end. So
absolutely, yeah. And if anyone has any questions, just reach out.
Yeah. So to close thing out, can you just tell us like where can they find you?
So you can find me at escarpmentlabs.com. You can just go to our website and then hit contact us, or you can email me, Nate at Escarpment Labs. For any additional resources you can find me on YouTube. The company's also, I don't use Instagram, but the company's on Instagram, which then eventually it does go to me directly. Again, YouTube, Instagram, any TikTok or things like that. I believe we're on TikTok. And yeah, if you have any information, if you have any questions, I'd ask. Sorry, check out our resources online, our knowledge base, our flavor guides. All that information we want to have there is available for free. We want to try and create, free to consumer, easy to understand information for you guys to improve the quality of your product. That's one of our kind of core tenets that we try to work under.
That's cool, man. And I think this is a great sum up, and this is where we will end the session. So Nate, thank you so much for joining the platform today and, helping us to have a better understanding about yeast and what shall we put on the dining table.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. This was great.
All right, man. Cool. Thanks so much. Hopefully, I don't know, our path may come across one day, in person, share some beers.
Sounds good.
All right. Cool, man. Take care in the meantime. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Here you go. Hopefully that, the black box of the yeast nutrient is uncovered here in this episode for you guys. And, actually it may sound complicated, but it is much simpler than what you think. Go check out all of the great information is well put in Escarpment Lab website. Listen to the talks that they provide in YouTube. Very helpful, I guarantee you guys. And all in all, as a brewer, our job is to cook the right food in a proper quantity for the yeast and serve them at the right time. Remember, happy yeast, happy beer. That's all for today. The Good Burp session will be back in no time, so stay tuned. Until next time, cheers and sawadee krap.